Have you ever rehearsed a perfect, dignified speech in the shower? The one where you finally tell your boss exactly what you think, only to smile and say, sure, no problem, the next morning? If so, welcome. You are in excellent and very large company. Now, here's something I have come to believe after years of watching people learn English. A difficult boss is one of the best teachers you will ever have. Not because the experience is pleasant, it usually isn't, but because nothing forces you to find the right words faster than a situation where the wrong words could cost you something. My friends, we're going to take that pressure and turn it into progress. By the end of today's episode, you will be able to describe a difficult boss clearly, talk about the situation calmly, and when you choose to, push back with the kind of language that protects your dignity and your job at the same time. We will do that in 3 stages. We will take that from the simplest building blocks up to the elegant, fluent stuff. So, 3 different levels: the basics, intermediate, and advanced. That's coming up. Don't go anywhere. This is a new episode from English Plus with Danny. Okay, let's start with the first level. Let's start with the basics. Let's start with the words. Before you can solve a problem, you have to name it. And naming it in clear English is half the battle. Your boss might be a manager, a supervisor, or simply your boss. These 3 are close cousins. A boss is anyone you answer to. A manager runs a team or a project. A supervisor watches over your daily work. And knowing the difference helps you talk about exactly who is causing the trouble. Now that we've got some words, let's move to adjectives, the describing words. A difficult boss might be rude. That means not polite. Might be strict. That means one with many hard rules. A difficult boss might be unfair, not treating people equally, or moody, happy one minute, angry the next. Does that ring any bells? Well, it does for me. But anyway, with these words, you can build a simple, honest sentence. You can say, for example, my boss is very strict. You can say she is sometimes rude. You can say he is unfair. Now notice the pattern. It's very simple. Subject, then the verb to be, then the adjective. This little structure, my boss is plus adjective, will carry you a long way. Now here's your first grammar point for today's episode, and it is a useful one. The difference between the present simple and the present continuous. Now we use the present simple for things that are generally true, like all the time. We say, my boss talks loudly. That means it is his usual habit. We use the present continuous, the ing form, for what is happening right now or around now. We say, for example, my boss is talking loudly. Now, this means he is talking loudly at this very moment. He's doing it right now. Now, this matters more than it looks. You see, my boss shouts sounds like a permanent character flaw. But my boss is shouting a lot this week sounds like a temporary phase. Maybe stress before a deadline. Now, same person, very different picture. Just by using this very simple grammar trick. All right, now let's add some politeness to the conversation. Because politeness, my friends, is power, no matter how many people tell you otherwise. When you want to ask for something at work, the magic words are can, could, and please. Can you help me is fine. Could you help me please is a lot better. It is softer and much more professional. With a difficult boss, soft and professional is usually your friend. Now try these out loud. Could you explain that again, please? Can we talk about this later? Could you give me more time, please? Each one asks for something without sounding like a demand. Now, a small but mighty word here is I. When you describe a problem, leading with you can sound like an attack. For example, if you say, "You are confusing me," that feels like blame. But if I say, "I'm a little confused," that's different. That feels like an honest report. Same situation, a gentler door. We will build on this idea a lot because it turns out that the secret to handling a hard boss in any language is learning to talk about your own experience instead of accusing theirs. Now, before we move up a level, there's something I would like to talk to you about. At this stage, your goal is not to win an argument. Your goal is to be understood and to stay calm. Calm, my friends, is a skill, not a personality type. Even if your English is basic, a slow, steady, "I understand, could you explain please," will earn you more respect than a fast, angry paragraph. So keep it short, keep it clear, and don't forget to breathe. Now let's add a few words for how you feel, because at work, you sometimes need to say it. Well, carefully, but you still need to say it. You might feel stressed. That means under pressure. You might feel worried, afraid something is wrong. You might feel tired or confused. The safe, professional way to share this is the simple frame, "I feel" plus the word, or "I'm a bit" plus the word. I feel a bit stressed today. For example, you can say, "I feel a bit stressed today," or "I'm a little confused about the task." Now, the two small words, "a bit" and "a little," soften everything and keep you sounding calm rather than complaining. And if you need a moment, the cleanest sentence in the world is, "Can I have a minute, please?" It's short, it's polite, and it buys you the breathing room you need to think. Now, finally, at this level, before we move on to the next level, let's talk about those small words you need to know that show you are listening. Because a difficult boss often just wants to feel heard. Small expressions like "I understand," "okay," "I see," or "got it." Well, my friends, these tiny phrases dropped in calmly while someone is talking at you lower the temperature without you agreeing to anything. And never underestimate a genuine thank you. Even when a boss is being hard, a calm "thank you for telling me" can quietly change the mood of the whole exchange. It costs you nothing. And in any language, it tends to bring out a slightly better version of the person in front of you. So, my friends, that's the first level for today. But as I promised you, we're going to discuss this topic at 3 different levels, and each level is going to be a little bit more sophisticated. We're going to add color and depth in level 2, and you don't want to miss that. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. All right, now let's add some muscle. At this level, English gives you tools to describe not just what your boss is, but how often, in what pattern, and what you wish were different. Now, this is where you stop sounding like a textbook and start sounding like a real person with a real situation. Now, first, let's start with phrasal verbs. You know what I'm talking about. Those tricky 2-word verbs that native speakers love and learners dread. Well, they are everywhere in workplace talk. So let's tame a few of them. Let's start with "to put up with something." Well, to put up with something means to tolerate it. For example, we can say, "I have put up with his moods for a year." To stand up for yourself means to defend yourself. For example, "I need to stand up for myself in meetings." To back off means to stop pressuring someone. For example, "I wish he would back off and let me work." To blow up means to suddenly get very angry. For example, "My manager blew up over a tiny mistake." And to calm down is just the opposite. That means to become peaceful again. Now, string them together and you can tell a whole story. For example, you can say, I usually put up with it, but yesterday he blew up over nothing, and I had to remind myself to calm down and not blow up too. You see? We can use these words. Of course, don't overuse them, but use them when you really need them. They're very powerful. So that's the phrasal verbs. Next, let's talk about adverbs of frequency, because patterns matter. Now, words like always, usually, often, sometimes, rarely, and never tell people how big the problem really is. For example, he always interrupts me. Well, that's a serious complaint. He sometimes interrupts me is a minor annoyance. Now, where do these words go? Well, usually before the main verb. We say, for example, she rarely says thank you. They often change the plan. Now, getting this right protects you from sounding dramatic when you are not, or sounding casual when the issue is genuinely heavy. But just one more thing about adverbs of frequency. Yes, they usually come before the main verb, but remember, after verb to be. Like if you want to say, for example, she is usually calm in the morning, don't put usually before is. She usually is calm in the morning. Remember, use your adverbs of frequency before the main verb, but after verb to be. Now, let's move on to something else. Let's talk about a beautiful structure for giving advice and imagining options. Let's talk about the second conditional. Now, the shape is if plus past simple, and the result clause would have would plus the verb. We use that for unreal or hypothetical situations. For example, if I were you, I would talk to HR. If my boss listened, things would be easier. Now, notice we say if I were, not if I was. Well, you might hear was, but if you really want to be careful about your English and you want to use perfect English, use were with all of them in second conditional. If I were, if she were, if he were, etc. Now, that little were is a flag that you are imagining, not reporting. Now, this structure is gold for two reasons. It lets you give a colleague advice gently, and it lets you describe the gap between how things are and how you wish they could be, without sounding like you are whining. And now let's talk about the art of softening. Direct English can feel blunt, even harsh. So we wrap our requests in soft padding. Now, instead of saying, this is wrong, try saying, I think there might be a small issue here. Instead of you didn't tell me, try, I'm not sure I got the message about that. Words like maybe, perhaps, a little, might, and I think are your cushions. Now, with a difficult boss, cushions prevent bruises. Now, watch how much friendlier this sounds. Perhaps we could look at the deadline again? I think it might be a little tight. Have you noticed? You have just disagreed and nobody got hurt. That's a win for me. Well, that's about softening. Now let's talk about reported speech. Because at this level, you may need to tell someone what your boss said, accurately and calmly. Now, the rule is that we usually shift the tense back one step. Now, if the direct speech goes like, he says, you are late, well, that becomes in reported speech, he said that I was late. She told me I will fix it becomes, she told me she would fix it. Now, why does this matter beyond grammar? Now, because if you ever document a conversation in an email to yourself or in a note to HR, clean reported speech makes you sound credible and composed instead of emotional. For example, he said the report was unacceptable and that I would lose the account. Well, this is far stronger than he was so mean, he basically said I'm useless. You might be angry, I know, you might be upset, we've all been there. But using the right language can be the whole difference between getting heard and maybe getting the problem solved in a way or getting overlooked and ignored. So that was about reported speech. Now let's talk about a real life skill that lives right at this level. The gentle boundary. Now, a boundary is a line you draw about what you will and will not accept. Now, in English, you can draw it without being aggressive. You can say, I'm happy to stay late tonight, but I won't be able to on Fridays. Or you can say, I want to get this right, so I'd appreciate clear instructions up front. Notice the structure. Agree with something first, then state your limit. Well, this is sometimes called the yes and of boundaries. You're not refusing to cooperate. You are defining how cooperation works. People respect a clear boundary far more than they respect silent resentment that explodes 3 months later. Now, one human truth to carry up to the next level is that most difficult bosses are not villains in a movie. They are often stressed, badly trained, frightened of their own bosses, or simply promoted past their skills. Understanding this does not excuse bad behavior. I'm not saying that. But it changes your tone. And my friends, tone is everything. When you stop seeing a monster and start seeing a flawed human under pressure, your English naturally softens into something more diplomatic, and diplomatic English is what gets results. So you would want to use that. And a quick word on written tone, because so much of dealing with a boss happens by email and message now. And writing strips out your friendly face and voice, leaving only the words. Now that makes tone softening phrases essential in writing. Openers like, I wanted to check on something, or just to clarify, and when you get a chance, could you? Now that keeps an email warm and low pressure. Closers like, thanks so much, and let me know what works for you, leave the door open. Without these cushions, even a neutral message can read as cold or pushy on a screen. Now here's a good habit to keep in mind. Before you send anything to a difficult boss, read it once and ask, could this be misread as rude? If yes, add a cushion before hitting send. And let me talk about one more thing before we move up to level 3. Let me talk about a genuinely useful technique for a boss who will not take a reasonable no. The calm, repeated answer. Now sometimes called the broken record. Instead of inventing new arguments each time, which only gives them new things to attack, you simply repeat your position in slightly different words, calmly, without rising to the pressure. For example, I understand it's urgent. I can have it ready first thing tomorrow. Or you can say, I hear you, and tomorrow morning is the earliest I can do it well. Or, I really do want this to be good, so tomorrow first thing it is. Now notice how the 3 sentences have the same message, with no anger, no extra ammunition handed over. People who push hard are usually expecting you to either cave or explode. And if you notice, calm repetition does neither. And it is remarkably hard to argue with. So use it to your own advantage. And now finally, we hit the top floor. That's level 3. We're going to talk about fluency and nuance and some really good tips that will help you deal with a bad boss. That's coming next. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Welcome to the top floor, my friends, where the language gets subtle and your real personality starts to shine through. At this level, you're not just describing a difficult boss. You are navigating one with idioms, register, and the kind of phrasing that makes the difference between sounding like a complainer and sounding like a professional who happens to have a problem. Now, let's load up on idioms, because this is where workplace English truly lives. A boss who controls every tiny detail is a micromanager. And to micromanage is to hover over every step. A boss with very high standards about something specific is a stickler for it. For example, we say, she's a real stickler for punctuality. When someone blames you publicly to protect themselves, they throw you under the bus. When the atmosphere is so tense that you choose every word carefully, you are walking on eggshells. When your boss takes credit for your idea, they may have stolen your thunder. And if you finally reach your limit, You might say the last straw has fallen. So, micromanager, a stickler for, throw you under the bus, walking on eggshells, steal your thunder, or last straw, sprinkle these in naturally, and your English suddenly sounds lived in. For example, you can say, I don't mind that she's a stickler for detail, but when she micromanages every email, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells all day. So that was our first step at this level. Now let's talk about register. Now, register is the formality dial on your language. Advanced speakers do not have one voice, they have several, and they choose. The diplomatic register is often your sharpest weapon. Now, compare you never explain anything with I'd find it really helpful to have a bit more context before I start. The second one says the same thing, but lands as a request, not an accusation. The trick is to convert complaints into requests and problems into shared goals. You are being unrealistic becomes help me understand how we can hit this deadline with the resources we have. You have not surrendered, you have reframed. And that is very powerful. Now, here's a quietly powerful grammatical tool that you can use at this level, the passive voice. Now, we use the passive voice here to take the heat out of conflict. Now, active voice points fingers. Passive voice points at the problem. You made a mistake in the figures is active and accusatory. There seems to be an error in the figures is passive-ish, let me say, and neutral. Nobody is on trial, so nobody gets defensive. Likewise, mistakes were made famously lets everyone save face. Used honestly, this is not about dodging responsibility. It's about lowering the temperature so the actual problem can get solved. With a defensive boss, a depersonalized sentence can be the difference between a fix and a fight. Now let's talk about hedging and the subtle subjunctive. Well, these are the markers of truly advanced and careful speech. Now, phrases like, I'd suggest, it might be worth, or I wonder whether, and perhaps we could consider, let you plant an idea without claiming territory. For example, I wonder whether it might be worth revisiting the timeline. That is grammatically humble and strategically strong. You sound thoughtful, not pushy. And when you propose a change, the subjunctive adds polish. For example, I'd recommend that the deadline be moved. But that sounds more formal and considered than I think we should move the deadline. Well, these are small flourishes, but at this level, small flourishes signal that you belong in the room. And remember, I'm just giving you as many weapons as possible, but remember register, it's very important. Sometimes I would have to argue that I think we should move the deadline is much better than saying I'd recommend that the deadline be moved. But that depends on what kind of meeting you have, who you're talking to, which boss are you talking to. Of course, I can't tell you which one is more appropriate. You will have to rely on your own judgment. But I'm trying to give you enough weapons that you can use in any situation. All right, now let's move on to a very important skill, and that is constructive pushback. Now, sometimes you just must disagree with your boss, and doing it well is an art. The classic structure is acknowledge, then question, then offer. First, acknowledge their goal. I know hitting Friday matters for the client. Then question the path gently. My concern is that rushing the testing could create bigger problems next week. And then offer an alternative. Could we deliver the core feature Friday and the rest Monday? Notice you never said you're wrong. You agreed with the destination and proposed a better road. This is how respected professionals disagree with power. And it works in English the same way it works in life. Now, there's also a documentation skill worth naming. When a boss is genuinely difficult, fluent, precise written English becomes your shield. After a confusing verbal instruction, a calm follow-up email, for example, just to confirm my understanding from our chat, I'll prioritize A over B and aim for Thursday. Let me know if I've got that wrong. That creates a clean record and quietly protects you. It's very important. Because let's face it, yes, I said some difficult bosses are just confused and they have their own issues, and we should be thoughtful. But sometimes, and I will have to be honest, I had my good share of both, they are pure evil. And you have to protect yourself. So this documentation skill is essential. That protects you. But remember, even with this, the tone should be helpful, not defensive, which is exactly why it works. You're not building a case against anyone. You're building clarity. But should you ever need the record, it is there, written in your own composed voice. Now, finally, let's talk about the wisdom that sits above all grammar. My friends, advanced language includes knowing what not to say and when to stop talking. Now, there's a difference between a hard boss and a harmful one. A demanding, blunt, even moody boss can be managed with the tools we just talked about. But if you ever face genuine abuse, humiliation, threats, discrimination, that is not a language problem to be solved with a clever phrase. That is a situation to escalate, to document formally, and sometimes to walk away from. The most fluent thing you can ever say to yourself is, I deserve to be treated with basic respect, and no job is worth losing that. Knowing the difference between a challenge to grow through and a line that has been crossed is the highest level of all. And my friends, let me tell you, no textbook can score it for you. You know it when you know it. And if you know it, just forget about everything I said. Just walk away, escalate, do something. Don't just look for the right word or idiom or phrase to say. That's irrelevant. Your well-being is the most important thing in the world, and no job is worth it. Trust me. And now let's move on to another point. Let me talk about an advanced strategy that transforms the whole relationship. Managing up. Well, this is the art of handling your boss so skillfully that you make both their job and yours easier. And it has its own vocabulary. You anticipate their needs. You keep them in the loop. You flag issues early rather than springing surprises. Phrases like, I thought I'd give you a heads up, or to keep you posted, and I wanted to flag this before it becomes a problem. Well, my friends, these phrases position you as a partner rather than a subordinate to be micromanaged. The deep irony is this. Many controlling bosses micromanage precisely because they feel out of the loop. Proactively feeding them information in calm, fluent English often loosens their grip far more effectively than any request to back off ever could. And finally, the most advanced English of all is the language you use inside your own head. A difficult boss can slowly poison your self-talk until he criticized the report becomes I'm bad at my job. Notice how the grammar of that thought overgeneralizes from one event to your whole identity. Fluent emotional self-management means catching that and rephrasing it precisely. He didn't like this report, stay specific and survivable. I'm a failure is a distortion dressed as a fact. The words, my friends, the words you choose privately shape how much of a bad boss you carry home with you at night. Learning to speak to yourself accurately and kindly in any language might be the single most valuable skill this whole topic can teach you, because you will use it long after this particular boss is just a story you tell. And with that, we're almost done with our episode, but I'm not going to leave you empty-handed. I'm going to give you a challenge, both a writing and a speaking challenge. Now, it's optional, obviously, but trust me, these challenges are what really take these episodes and these lessons, if you will, and really cement them in your knowledge and your English skills. So you'll be taking your knowledge and English to the next level. That's what we do in English Plus with Danny, right? So here's your optional challenge, and you get to pick your weapon, of course. Think of one real specific thing a difficult boss has done or could do that frustrates you. Now, let's start with the writing challenge. If you choose the writing challenge, Write a short, calm, professional email responding to that situation. Use at least one softening phrase, one boundary, and one piece of clean reported speech or a confirming sentence. Now read it back and ask yourself, does this protect both my dignity and my job? Now edit until the answer is yes. That's the writing challenge should you choose to write. But if you prefer speaking, well, there's a speaking challenge for you as well. Now, out loud, role play the conversation twice. The first time, say what you actually feel, raw and unfiltered, just to get it out. But the second time, translate that same feeling into the diplomatic register from level 3. Remember, acknowledge, question, and offer. Record yourself if you can. That's a very useful technique, by the way. And you will see that the gap between version 1 and version 2 is exactly the distance you have traveled in this lesson. Now mind that gap and keep walking it. So these are the challenges, my friends, and you're more than welcome to send your challenges to me, but I will have to be honest with you. I prioritize looking at and sending my feedback to the challenges sent by my subscribers on Patreon. I'm not saying that you have to be subscribers, not at all, but I'm just saying because of the time restraints, I can't look at all of them. But you never know, just send them anyway. I might look at them, I might send my feedback to you. But that'll be everything I have for you for today, how to deal with a bad boss in English, the calm words and phrases that actually work. That's what we talked about. That was a new episode from English Plus with Danny. And I know, at this stage you might be asking, you haven't been posting new episodes for a while. This is new. You've even changed the title, the logo. I know that you have a lot of questions, and I've been receiving a lot of questions, but I'm going to answer all those on Saturday. We're going to have a special episode, and it's called Coffee with Danny, with me, obviously. And we're going to talk about everything, not in a structured format like I do today. It's going to be a casual episode where I answer all your questions. Now, I already have a lot of questions to answer, but if you have any questions you would like to send me, you can do that. You can send them to ask@englishpluspodcast.com. Now, with that being said, thank you very much for listening to today's episode. I'm Danny. I'm very happy you listened to the episode until the end. I'll see you again tomorrow with something new to talk about, and always something interesting from English Plus with Danny. And remember, we might have changed the title, yes, but we will never change our slogan. Never stop learning. I'll see you again next time.